Right, why am I weighing in on this little scuffle between Academic Agent and Lotus Eaters presenter Stelios? Because I can, and that's about it. Pretty much the reason why I do any video, but anyway. Stelios put out this tweet. I'm detecting lots of conceptual chaos and confusion with terms like liberalism, post-liberalism, fascism, and woke right. Perhaps I'll soon have to end my Euromaxing phase, make an omelet by breaking many eggs, and set order in chaos. I have no idea what any of that means. Now, anyone who follows politics, well, my condolences, knows those phrases are ultimately wank. They're just devices used to keep the plebs in the conversation mentally narrowed and reflect friend-enemy distinctions. So Academic Agent replies, as he does, liberalism is whatever our leaders decide today. Post-liberalism is anyone who has stopped believing the lies of liberalism, based. Fascism just means when the right uses power, true. Woke right is anyone who doesn't like Israel who is not a leftist. Glad to be of service. I have a slightly more encompassing definition of woke right, but that portion is definitely in it. But notice the reply. It's trimmed, lean, no excess, clean as a whistle, but also its present power dynamics. So Stelios replies, notice how historical considerations are absent from your account of these concepts, especially liberalism and fascism. You are mostly describing how these terms are used by the establishment right now. Yeah, no shit, Sherlock, the elite doesn't care, they're framing devices. Your previous post said conceptual chaos and confusion, so he cleared that up for you. Again, glad to be of service. Yet the establishment's narrative would not be as strong if people had a better understanding of history, including the history of ideas that informs the language of the current dominant narrative. So much of this paragraph is utterly nonsensical, but anyway. What exactly is your basis for this hypothesis? Because if this statement is anything to go by, you don't have historical knowledge of them either, or else you wouldn't be confused. And we're going to assume you mean you because the only one reference in your post is yourself, confused about modern-day terminology. Unless you're trying to imply you're some kind of mind reader of ignorance and think plugging their heads with historical knowledge will somehow clear up said confusion? Which still doesn't make any sense because if you have said knowledge, it hasn't stopped you from being confused, and if you don't, where is your evidence a suggestion of yours will pay dividends? How the hell is the layman knowing jack about their history going to prohibit anything, especially when AA cleared up the confusion with no historical reference whatsoever? That doesn't make any sense. What's the context of the words used? It's not historical. Outside of, hey look, this isn't used the same way it was during the Enlightenment or World War II, how does that knowledge translate into anything useful by means of understanding present-day power dynamics? Care to elaborate? Honestly, it all comes off like someone who wants to flex what they know to feel some semblance of relevancy, but anyway. That's how you get people to offset the negative effects of leftist brainwashing and get them to see things like how ridiculous it is to say that resisting open borders or not transitioning children is fascism, and also get them to see that communism was not of noble intent. Okay. All of that is complete bollocks. Have you ever spoken to regular people? Are you honestly so disconnected to think that the present behavior of leftists is a product born and perpetuated primarily through ignorance? A problem that can be corrected solely through education, so-called. If you believe that, you're insane. I don't know why this mentality is so prevalent. It's very lefty-coded. This strange presupposition that if one but bestowed upon the masses the correct information, they will magically develop the third eye, see through the narrative framing, and manifest the will to resist and oppose, curtailing the machinations of the current ruling elite. Again, how and why do you believe in such wank? In what world do you live in where you think information equals agency? The mass does not believe in things because it's true, they believe in things when the environment designates it as functional. Now, given all of the above, I was extremely skeptical that Stelios would even understand what AA is trying to say, so why he thinks this would all culminate in a fruitful debate seems completely cockeyed to me. But given that I am a fair individual, and that I don't know much about Stelios, I wanted to give him a fair shake with someone from our side, so I decided to watch him talk with Oren McIntyre on a video called Can We Return to Classical Liberalism? Now, given that the title is a question, it impresses upon me some idea of what I could potentially expect from said video. What is classical liberalism? What were its founding roots? Why was it any good? How did it sour? And most importantly, seeing as you wish to return to it, what new guardrails will you erect to ensure it doesn't decay to the state society is in now? Was any of that answered? Not really. Which begs another question, what exactly was the point? I don't know. I'm not saying the video was bad, I'm just saying if you go into it with the expectation you're gonna get that question answered, you will be sorely disappointed. Didn't get an answer to the video's question. What I did get, however, was an insight into how Stelios thinks, because the implied subject of that video suggests a dive into political power theory, and Stelios hasn't the faintest clue what that is. That's just observable reality, people. And keep in mind that video was 7 months ago as well. But this was to be expected, by the way. Frankly, that was my inkling when I saw his reply with the fascisms label, but anyway, it's all very tedious. So I asked this on X, using AA as a hypothetical and going purely off a time and value analysis. AA sees this kind of stuff all the time, as do I. He's a much sharper chap than I am, and even I could see the incoming roadblock here. We know debates don't shift the mind of the person you're debating, and especially online, you just have two groups of people looking to milk the show for a knockout blow and circle jerks. So what exactly would be AA's incentive to engage in any debate? I thought that's a fair question, especially if you've seen how debates just degenerate into a shit show. So Stelios replies, I told Academic Agent we should debate each other since he frequently takes issues with my posts he is free to ignore, by the way. But it turns out debates are gay. Well, he's also free to ignore your debate offer, by the way. Yet he debated Dan on tariffs and Connor. I suspect that he has debated Carl as well. I have drawn my conclusions. Yes, so have I. They appear to be salty. Do your video. I expect nothing but framing. People have understood who is starting this and who misrepresents the other one. Well, AA does elite theory, so to say you expect nothing but framing is not the wisest reply. It seems needlessly antagonistic. And considering you proposed the debate, the starting would be you. And the misrepresentation is where exactly? Bringing up other people he debated makes you sound petty and envious, like someone who got turned down for a date. But AA replies, the question is, do you care about ideas and interrogating those ideas, or do you care about little moments of debate flair, rhetorical flourishes, and point scoring where two opposing sets of fans declare victory for their champion and no ideas are discussed at all, aka every internet debate to ever take place? What is the value of debate? You know, I'm actually surprised AA was this polite, if only because Stelios replied like a stuck-up wanker. I'll be honest, if he came at me with that entitled attitude, I'd have told him to get fucked. I will defend AA's stance, by the way, because it is absolutely true. That is the nature of internet debates. Debates aren't about ideas, debates are about winning. And considering the evidence presented, I suspected strongly one would simply talk past the other. But we decided to go and watch the two respective videos. AA's one was exactly what you would expect. Elaboration on what he said on X. As a matter of fact, I would say it's a really good introduction video for people who want to step outside of the cycle, as it were, and see what actual politics looks like. It's a good solid video, it's not a challenging one to follow at all. Well, I say that, but if it is a challenging video to follow and that isn't for me, I sound like a massively conceited prick. More so than I already do. Whereas, if it is objectively simple to follow, I'm insinuating Stelios is an idiot. Moving on, actually we're gonna move on to his reply video, which I'm just gonna go full blunt force trauma here. Stelios, at least with regards to this stuff, is just an insufferably boring midwit, and there's no getting around that. And my word does he waffle, fucking hell. And the more he talks, the more it all goes off a damn cliff. Within 5 minutes, you could tell he would learn absolutely nothing from this. Nothing at all. At the start, he says AA's definitions are not helpful and that what he represents is how the establishment narrative uses them. Now, represents is technically the correct word, but when you're discussing politics, that word, kind of muddies up the works. But does he elaborate on why he thinks his methodology would be superior to AA's? No. I need to stress this, and this will probably be the most important thing I'll ever say when it comes to politics. If you are ever going to make any headway into understanding this stuff, it is absolutely imperative that you are able to look at the world for what it is and not what you wish it to be. That sounds simple in theory, but I would wager well north of 90% of people can't actually do that. Stelios can't do that. He demonstrates he can't do that. The reason I said represents is an inappropriate word to use is when it came to fascism, he claims AA's framework, and again, it's not his framework, AA is just translating these words as a function. Stelios claims he can't oppose the status quo without acquiring the label of fascism, and therefore he must reject the framework. AA is hardly a fan, and he doesn't identify as a fascist, so how the fuck did you reach that conclusion? Again, that doesn't make any sense. Another ability that appears to elude him, take the word gay for example. Now once upon a time it meant happy, but we don't live in those times anymore, and no amount of you extolling the virtues of knowing such history will make a lick of difference with regards to its modern day usage, and neither is everyone else knowing that information either. Now apply that concept to political terminology. I would have thought it obvious words change over time, but no, apparently not. And his refusal to acknowledge the reality of how woke right is used is borderline embarrassing, which frankly tells us he has no capacity for pattern recognition either, considering the people who don't shut up trying to push that phrase as a pejorative may as well have their chosen allegiance painted on their fucking foreheads. But anyway, he just flat out rejected the definition given by AA, saying, "I don't think this is true. Reality doesn't care what you think, the world doesn't revolve around you." He then rambles off some nonsense about how the genesis of the term originates with the Lotus Eaters, how words enter mainstream discourse, and it's all just utterly irrelevant pish. So, confused about the use of the word, doesn't agree with how it's used, apparently knows the genesis of the term, but can't seem to square why his origin definition of the phrase isn't mirrored in the public discourse. All of which, combined, shows a shocking lack of self-awareness, seeing as this refutes his entire premise that knowing the history of any terms matter, because here he demonstrates that possessing such knowledge changes precisely fuck all. He doesn't seem to understand words can derive definition from use, or that translating language does not equate to endorsement. Someone needs to sit him down and politely explain this to him. If someone has a simple explanation for an easily observable phenomenon, you coming in and gumming up the works with convoluted word salad wank makes you seem like a twat. Here's the reality. He may have a wealth of historical knowledge with regards to these ideas, yet he has no wisdom to use them. He can hold them as abstract databanks, but he struggles to apply them because he's not a thinker. He's not much more than a sophisticated normie, really. You could really see this in the last, say, 25 minutes of his video with Orrin. Honestly, the funniest bit of that whole interview was watching him buffer in real time, trying to square the reality that what were considered standard cultural practices during the days of classical liberalism's inception are utterly incompatible with the modern world. Like he's just thought about it then and there for the first time. These are concepts born of a specific place, to a specific people and a specific time, and you can't just transplant these variables across eras like a damn Time Lord. Because, and this might come as a bit of a surprise to all of you, the world is not the same now as it was in the 18th century. Shocking! Again, that video was 7 months ago and he's changed nothing. Which should tell you, for him, this is personal. It's an identity. You could see this in the way he speaks about his worldview. AA's analysis is how things are, how the machine operates, how the wheels grind. It's neutral, it's descriptive. Stelios actually scoffs at this because he doesn't understand it. With him, everything is about what he thinks, how he feels, what he believes, because he reasons like a woman, emotionally. It's prescriptive. It's why he rejected what he assumes is AA's framing. It's not because it stifles him intellectually, that doesn't even make any sense. No, his perception concludes he can't identify as his label that makes him feel special. It's why he spurred saying AA's framing of liberalism reminded him of 1984. Man, there is layers of irony to that comparison, I'll tell you. The phrase, "ignore the evidence of your eyes and ears," comes to mind, seeing as Stelios himself does that, being a coping classical liberal that refuses to come to terms with the fact that what he likes on paper has soured in practice. He can't distinguish ought from is. There is something to take away from all of this, though. If you're going to pull something like this in public, challenging someone of, let's not mince words here, a vastly superior intellectual caliber, and you not only can't seem to understand what they're saying, you largely ignore them, you even try to intellectually justify yourself, all the while being wrong. You know, ill-advised arrogance and a stubbornly thick skull doesn't exactly reflect well. At best, they'll question what the hell you're up to. More than likely, though, they'll just call you an idiot. And seeing as this environment runs on personalities, they will likely assume anyone who listens to you is of a similar persuasion. I'm still trying to figure out what he was ultimately trying to gain by doing this. I actually think he's envious of AA, because being around someone who's vastly more versed than you, who brushes off everything you've spent years of your life investing in as ultimately worthless, that's gonna sting. The reason I said he comes off as someone who seeks relevancy is the insistence on the value of etymology, and that conveniently happens to be something he is versed in. All that I've heard from his side in the grand scheme of things is nothing more than the disconnected ramblings of a possessed ideologue wedded to his liberal priors. And given that he conceded virtually no ground, admitted no fault, and would carry on seemingly irrespective of anything AA said, leads to the conclusion AA was correct to reject the debate. He just doesn't get it, he just doesn't understand power. A wise man knows when to stay silent. And there's a reason why that phrase doesn't feature a woman. Cheers for watching once again, I apologize for nothing.